So today is just a scouting mission, really, but that doesn't mean you can't bring all your stuff, right? So I don't know if it's just me or if it's a defect in all sort of travel and landscape photographers, but for some reason when I'm at home, I just don't shoot. I just don't go out and do it. I mean, I live by the beach, there's sunsets and lifeguard towers and piers and all sorts of great stuff to take pictures of. But for some reason when I'm at home, I just don't go do it. And I don't know if it's just that I'm so familiar with the place that I'm not inspired. You know, the minute I walk onto the street in Europe, I can't get enough, but for some reason walking around at home, I'm just not inspired to take pictures. So in an effort to overcome that, we have decided to embark upon a little project. We'll call it the California Project. The California Project. And the idea here is that we're gonna shoot around home, and instead of shooting color and grand landscape, we're going to shoot only black and white. We're gonna do high key, and we're gonna kind of try and break some of the rules of photography to come up with some more interesting takes on stuff we see every day. So that's the idea. Make stuff we see every day feel cool enough to call art. Tonight, it's all about lifeguard towers. So we're looking for a lifeguard tower that's sort of aesthetically good. I'm kind of hoping to shoot this really low and isolate the tower and maybe some sand, a strip of sand, but not much else, and then a lot of sky. So I need the right lifeguard tower, and that's turning out to be a bit of a pain. We have one more place to check, and the sun has already gone down, so we're sort of hightailing it down the Pacific Coast Highway right now to check one other spot in the hopes that there will be a tower there that we like. All right. Woo! All right, so I think we found our tower. This is Tower 26, and sun's already gone down. The light's really kind of fading quickly, and so what we're gonna do is we'll come back tomorrow morning. Too fast. I'll be back. I don't know why I did that. Okay, so I think we found our lifeguard tower here, Tower 26, but the light's fading really fast and we want a really even scene. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come back tomorrow morning and we're gonna take the shot then. We're only a couple of miles from the house, so it's no big deal. That's the nice thing about the California Project, is there it has to be close to home. So yeah, we're gonna come back tomorrow, and I guess we'll see you then. All right, so this is the, this isn't actually the one. This is one down from the one because there's hobos sleeping at the one. But it's okay, it'll be just as good. We're waiting for the sun to kind of start coming on. It's still really dark, but we're gonna go and get set up and try and make this thing happen. To get low enough for this shot, I had to take the center column out of my tripod just to get this thing as low as possible, because what I don't want is to see the oil rigs and some of the other stuff that's out in the water that's lighting up, because that's gonna it's gonna be hard to remove later. All right, so we're getting close. Light's starting to come on. I'm laying on my stomach in the middle of a parking lot. Basically what now I'm gonna do is frame up the shot, and I'm gonna try it two different ways. I'm gonna try horizontal and vertical. I really want this to be a vertical shot, but I'm thinking that we can maybe expand the canvas later, but I'm gonna need the width. So we're gonna frame this up and see which way it works best, and then go from there. This is so awkward. All right. All right, so I've got my shot all set up. I've put the lifeguard tower in the lower right corner of the frame. And what I'm doing is I'm leaving as much sort of sky as I can, just a little sliver of sand at the bottom just to kind of anchor the shot, because I know that this is, when we push this to high key in black and white, that I want something nice and heavy to anchor it at the bottom, but still have lots of air and white space at the top. So that's kind of how we're set up. Now I've focused using my screen. I'm on manual focus. I've got this great Z finder from Zacuto on the back that actually allows me to zoom into my shot and make sure that the focus is completely tight. Because there's nothing worse than, you know, just being that little bit off. And I always find that autofocus, especially like this early in the morning, just doesn't quite get it tack sharp. But if I can zoom in and do it by hand, it's that 5% better that makes an enlargement just good. So anyway, that's where we are. I'm shooting at 1 full second at the moment, a little bit back from a second. And as the light changes, that's gonna get adjusted. But right now we've got a really nice sort of blown out sky because there's clouds, but they're all really evenly lit. So we're just gonna take this right now. That looks really good. I'm gonna darken it just a little bit, pull the exposure down to 1/3 of a second. And I'm shooting wide open, which is f3.5 on this lens. And I guess we've got, you know, all right, now the last thing I'm gonna do before I leave, I've just taken the shot that I think is gonna be the shot, and it's horizontal. So I'm gonna actually just tilt the camera towards the sky and get a shot of the sky in case I need to match these up later for extending the canvas if I want this to be vertical in the end. So I'm just gonna pitch it up just above. That's it, final shot. Oh my gosh, I'm so tired of sitting like that. All right, so here we are, we're back home. The photos have been taken, the photos have been offloaded, they're on the computer and ready to go. Now I wanna kind of walk you through my process for taking that shot from raw out of the camera to kind of where I want it to be for print. Now we talked in the car about wanting it to be black and white, wanting it to be high key, really making that composition almost out of balance, really pushing that lifeguard tower to the bottom of the frame, and kind of playing around with that idea. And so we're gonna do that in the computer. I just wanted to say, this isn't a tutorial. If you want tutorials, leave me a comment and we'll do something about that in a future video or future videos. But really all I wanna do is sort of talk you through my process. So if you have questions on this, if I move too fast and it doesn't make sense, totally cool, leave me a comment. We'll do a whole piece on that. But for a couple of minutes at the end of this, I really just wanted to show you my process from camera to canvas. All right, so here we are, we're in Adobe Bridge. I have all the files that we took there at the lifeguard tower pulled out, and I've gone through these and I've checked for things like focus and the exposure and whether or not I like where the clouds are. And I think I've actually settled on those last two, the ones that we shot before I got up from being all uncomfortable laying on my stomach back there. So I think those are the two we're gonna work with, and it includes the shot where I tilted up and got a little bit of sky. Now I don't think we're gonna need that shot, but it's good to have it, and we're gonna adjust it in Camera Raw at the same time, so at least all the settings are the same in case we need to go grab it later. So I'm just gonna grab those two here in Bridge, and I'm gonna hit Command R to open them in Camera Raw. I'm gonna make sure they're both selected so that all the things that I do will apply to both. Now we could select them both and synchronize later, I know that, but it's just easier to do it the first time. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the histogram here, or I'm gonna do, you're not gonna do it because you're just watching. I don't know why I say that. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at the histogram. Now, obviously this is a really even exposure, so nothing's blown out. We don't need to worry about any of that, but tonally, it is on the dark side, and we're trying to go sort of that high key, really bright, really sort of almost blown out look. So first thing I'm gonna do is grab that exposure, and I'm just gonna push that up, maybe as much as 3/4 of a stop or so, just to brighten the whole thing up. And before I go any further, I'm actually just gonna dump the saturation because we're dealing with black and white anyway. I'm not gonna do my black and white conversion here in camera, I'm gonna do it in Photoshop, but I don't want to be distracted by color. So I'm just gonna throw that saturation out for right now, and we're just gonna deal with tones. And then I'm also just gonna zoom right in on that tower since that's our focal point and make sure that everything we do, we're getting the tower right. Next, I'm going to pull the highlights all the way down. That's just gonna preserve anything in those clouds, anything in the sky. It's gonna preserve it because we're gonna blow it out a little more later, and I don't wanna lose it all just yet. Next, I'm gonna push the shadows up just to sort of even out the entire thing. I'm not gonna play with whites and I'm not gonna play with blacks, but I will push the clarity, maybe just up to 10, just to add a little bit of mid-tone contrast here for us. Now the real work here is gonna be done in the tone curve. And what I want to do here is, first thing I want to do is I want to drag the blacks and the whites in just a little bit. We don't have any information. We don't have any information out here in the corners anyway, so I'm just going to pull them in a little bit so that the adjustments are a little more even. I say a little a lot. Have you noticed that? All right. Then I'm going to pull just the very blacks down, just about like that, so that I'm getting some really dark spots. I'm not going all the way to black, but I am darkening those things a little bit, and then immediately, there's a little bit, there's more. And then I'm gonna pull, I'm just gonna keep saying it, I'm gonna pull the mid-tones right there above those darks back up, and it gives us a really nice curve here through the highlights. And if we back out, we can see that we just added a really nice contrasty adjustment that's going to serve us well. So I think that that's as far as I'm going to go here in Bridge. So I'm gonna bring my saturation back. Then I'm gonna open both of those as objects in Photoshop. That'll take just a second. But when those come over, we're going to now convert to black and white. So here's our second image. Obviously it looks almost completely white. It's not, but it looks that way. Let's go back to the first one. We're back here, we have color. I'm not gonna worry about the bird or the fire pit or any of this because I think we're gonna crop it out. But what I do wanna do is just do a black and white adjustment layer. The reason I like to do this is because there's a little more finite control over the mix of all those colors by doing it as an adjustment layer rather than just killing the saturation in Camera Raw. So the first thing I know is that if I hide this for a second, there's a lot of blue. If we look right at the tower, there's cyan here. There's actually cyan in all of this blue. And what I want to do is I want to use these blue sliders to bring in some texture, and I want to push one down and I want to pull one up. And by separating them like that, we'll keep that texture, and I'll show you what I mean. But first, if I turn this back on and we look at the scene, if I pull the blues down, watching the sky back there, you see here in the lower left-hand side that we bring a lot of sky back if we do that. And that's all because those tones live in the blues. But those tones also live in the cyans. So if I pull this blue back up and I drag cyan to the left, we get the same thing. But if you look, the cyan has a lot of grain in it, whereas the blue really doesn't. And so we're actually gonna flip-flop these. We're gonna push the cyan up and we're gonna pull the blue down. And this is just to create a little bit of an anchor in the tones in the sky so that we don't lose the entire sky as we push this file around. The other thing I'm noticing right now is that I feel like I do kind of have a dark spot around the tower that I wanna deal with before we go too much further. So I'm actually gonna double click on that smart object, and that'll open me back up in Camera Raw again where I was before. I'm gonna drop the saturation again so I can see what I'm doing, and I'm gonna grab a radial adjustment layer and make sure my corrections are reset. I'm gonna make sure that it's set to inside, and then I'm just gonna drag a nice little circle around that tower, and I want it nice and feathered. So the feather by default is at 50. I'm gonna push it probably close to 100 here. And then I'm just gonna bring the exposure up just maybe that much, and maybe the highlights a little bit too. It just feels like it's a little darker than I'd like right there. Maybe ovalize that a little bit. Let me show you before. Oh, that's not gonna help you, is it? Bring the saturation back, before and after, before and after. You can see we're just brightening up that spot a little bit. Just seemed like it was a little heavy. So here we are actually in the image. I'll zoom in so you can see before and after, before and after. So I like that, that looks good. Next thing I wanna do is I wanna crop this to the appropriate crop. Now, I said from the beginning, I want this to be bright and I want it to be almost uncomfortably unbalanced with just this little sliver of stuff at the bottom and then a whole lot of white space. Really get a little artsy with it. So I'm gonna grab my crop tool, 2x3, that's the aspect ratio I want. That's the original aspect of the file, and it's easy to frame 2x3. So we're gonna start there, but what I do know is that I want a little bit more space, there's a little bit more space for that tower down at the bottom. And this is one reason why I like the horizontal, because I do have so much more to work with. Now I could have shot, I guess, with a wider angle and dealt with the distortion and whatever, but this will work just fine. So I'm just gonna give us a little more canvas, a little more. And I like that positioning. Now, because that's a smart object down there, if I crop, it's not actually cropping pixels, so I can still move this around if I wanted to fix it, but I really like where it was. Now, the thing that we're dealing with now is that we've cropped outside of the canvas area, so we've got these checkerboard that tell us that there's no information up there. This is easily solved because there's nothing up here. It's not like it's not like a bunch of sunset clouds or something where we would worry about stretching it. What we can do is we can actually grab the marquee tool, pull that down, and I'm selecting as much of the sky as I can down to just above that little tower off the tower there. And then I'm just gonna click Command J, and that'll make a copy of that sky. If I hide everything else, you'll see we just have a copy of what we'd selected, and it's just the sky. And then we can Command T and just expand that to the top. And there we go, we've got the sky. Now, the last thing I want to do before we start playing with this and looking at what it will look like with a border with some sort of mat on it is that I feel like on the left-hand side, it's just a little too dark, just a little too heavy. This is personal preference and it's just me being OCD. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my gradient tool, make sure it's set to linear gradient with white as the foreground color and that I am white to transparent up here so that I'm not putting black over everything. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm just going to drag a gradient right from the left to the right there. And obviously that's too strong, so I'm going to change my blend mode to soft light and I'm going to pull the fill down to maybe 60%. So you can see if I do before and after here, it's just sort of taking the edge off that left-hand side and it's allowing the eye to not get sort of stuck there in the shadows in the left, but actually to move across. I'll bring that back down a little bit more, maybe into the 40s somewhere. Yeah, that's good. All right, so for me, I'm gonna come back to this and just OCD the crap out of it, but for our example here, this is good enough. But what I wanna know is, if I print this on a paper that's a little bit bigger than the print so that I can frame it with a bit of a border, do I have enough gray to make that distinction at the corners? So what I'm gonna do is Command A, I'm gonna copy that and I'm just gonna create a new document. And I'm gonna paste that inside and then I'm going to expand the canvas, image canvas size. If I select relative, make sure my center point is selected and white is my background, and then I'm just gonna expand this by 500 pixels in each direction. I know that's a magic number because I've worked with this file already. And there we go. So now if I hide everything here, you can see that we do indeed have plenty of gray up here, even though it looks like it was almost completely washed out when we were looking at it without the edging. Once we put that on, we can see there's plenty. I think that I would actually add a little more contrast to this. I think I would push those brights a little bit more. So let's pull up a curves adjustment layer. Even though we're not in our original file, we can still do it this way. And I'm just gonna set an anchor, maybe in the shadows, so I don't really tweak the shadows too much. And then I'm just gonna take right about here, and I'm just gonna lift. I actually wanna go, that might be too far. Before and after. Okay, it's a little heavy-handed, but I'm just going to reduce the opacity a little bit. Maybe to around 70%. So if we look before and after, before and after, you see how looking at it on that white border changes the whole way that we edit. So sort of the idea of knowing what we're going to do with a shot before we do it, it's helpful. I don't know how else to say that. All right, so now that we've done that, what we need to do is take that curves layer back to where we were. So I'm gonna just grab that curves layer right out of the layers panel, drag it over to the shot that we're working on, and just dump it on there. Make sure that it's falling in the right spot so that it's over my little gradient there and underneath the black and white. Not that that really matters, the order of those two. So if we look at it here, it does actually look like we've blown the crap out of that sky, but we already know over here, we didn't. Sweet. So now, just to be OCD about this, let's put it into a frame, and here's the final shot. Thanks for watching. This was my first YouTube video. If you like this, please hit that like button, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm new here, and I can use all the help I can get. So thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.